That is a Facebook mention. All right, so we're gonna get started shortly.
اسمح لي استاذ اسامه.
وي
ما سمعتكش فاش كنتي كتهضر على يعني الترتيب ديال المداخلات.
So you're going to speak first, Ustad Youssef Yacoubi. So it's exactly how the announcement is made.
Okay,
so you'll be speaking first, and then Ustad Salah Ayari will speak next, followed by Ustad Elias Bensalem, then Amine, then Ustad Al Kirat, and then we'll wrap up the session. Okay.
Okay.
And right now we're getting ready. Thank you. So if you could please mute yourselves. We're right now we're trying to check our online platform. We're trying to go live here. I mean, are we ready for the live session? All right. We'll get started in a second. So we'll start in about 3 minutes.
Sama, you're going to time us, right?
Yes. So we're going to tell you when you reach, when you'll have 2 minutes left, I'll let you know.
Okay.
Right.
Rather when we are left with 5 minutes, I think.
We can do that too.
Yeah, 5 minutes is good.
It's better,
all right.
Because 2 minutes does not leave much.
All right, all right.
Okay, okay.
Okay, I mean, are we already online?
Yes, we are.
Very good, very good. So good afternoon, everyone. It looks like that we are already live now, and as we're testing our online platform here, and it also looks like we already have very nice turnout of people. Thank you so very much for all of you who have registered. I think we had at least 200 people registered for the webinar, so we really thank you. Please know that this webinar is going to be recorded for those of you who are interested, and we can definitely share with a larger audience. My name is Oussama El Addouli, and I'm the director of the IES Abroad Morocco, the Institute for the International Education of Students. We're a branch of a nonprofit organization based in Chicago. We work in the study abroad field. We're a study abroad provider. We're very passionate about the work we do, and we work with a large network of over 500 elite colleges and universities around the world. And it's really my great pleasure to present our very first webinar series this summer on study abroad, international higher education, and COVID-19. So we'll be speaking a lot about crisis, the challenges, but also its opportunities and prospects, with a focus a little bit on this very first webinar on virtual study abroad and online learning. In this panel, I'll be joined by distinguished speakers and experts from the field of higher education and study abroad. So each presenter will have 15 minutes each. So hopefully we'll be able to be the time and leave some time for Q's and A's. So just a technical thing. So if you guys face any issues technically, please know that this webinar is going to be recorded. So save your questions or use the comment section on Facebook, IES Abroad Rabat Facebook page to watch this webinar and also leave your comments and questions. We'll be taking these questions to our panelists and try to answer them. But before introducing my panel, I'd really like to share a few remarks that I will start by saying that obviously there have been a lot of discussions and a lot of people speaking about the crisis, its challenges of this new crisis. But in general, I think that the lack of references in similar crises in the past makes it a little bit difficult to predict, at least in the near future, in my opinion, what may happen in the near future, especially about the temporary cessation of face-to-face learning in higher education institutions that has left us, that has left a lot of people working in the field, and especially obviously the undergraduate students and those who are about to finish upper secondary students schooling and aspire to enter higher education. I think they've left us in a completely new situation without a clear idea of how or how long this will last. And I think this is very important for all of us in terms of at least strategic planning and thinking, especially, knowing are we going to plan on short-term versus long-term strategic planning. And obviously the immediate impact on thousands of students and daily lives, the costs incurred, and obviously the financial burdens that come that comes with this. The learning continuity, in our case, people working in the study abroad field in higher education, the international mobility of students that remains a burden, a question. And we'll see through your different presentations how faculty, students are also impacted significantly at the workplace. And I really like, I'm very happy that Dr. Youssef Yacoubi, our first presenter, will be speaking about what he called the historic transformative value of COVID-19 in light of other epidemics throughout history, and how they have shifted education itself over the centuries, and how such collective experience, and I really like that, how such collective experience should shift our approach to the ways we handle pedagogy itself in study abroad and higher education. Obviously, professionally speaking, and even sometimes psychologically, we'll see through different presentations that the fact that not all higher education institutions do have strategies for continuity in place, and hence at least the importance of the current and rapid adoption of online teaching and learning that will likely lead to I imagine to permanent changes, but most importantly, it will generate some data, and a lot of people already started to do research on this data that will help us somehow accelerate and improve our understanding of this crisis and this new teaching modalities. Quickly, as a second remark here, international mobility, and as you all know, since January 2020, the spread of COVID-19 has affected the global travel of thousands of students and faculty, and flow of international students, university staff around the world. And this impact obviously will, in my opinion, will result in many differentiated ways, depending on the country in question, but also on the epidemiological restrictions, obviously the visa conditions, the severity that is exhibited in these respective countries, and of course the limited offer of non-commercial flights. And I think that different countries will tolerate this crisis differently, and hence I think each country will have different plans. The economic reasons obviously are an important interplay here, and the support funds that a lot of these students used to get from their country of origins will decrease certainly. And in the US, I mean, we all work with a lot of US universities, and you belong to many of them. Many prestigious universities are now located at epicenters of the pandemic. Amine and I was just speaking a while ago about Columbia University as one of them. And I think that being research and attraction poles par excellence for the global mobility, I think the closure of many of these universities is a really serious blow in the academic mobility to the US, especially that the US is the first receiving country in the world. And finally, the third remark that I would like to say is that at the end of the day, I think that as we're experiencing this crisis, as we're going through this and learning, we will have to make a step further at the end of the day and try to establish some kind of universal principles for the recognition of the degrees that will come up, from these new teaching modalities across borders, and try to facilitate the academic mobility, continue to facilitate the academic mobility of students, teachers, and researchers, and learning. Obviously, I think by guaranteeing the academic achievements and make sure that they are equitably evaluated and recognized on the basis of solid quality assurance mechanisms that allow people to continue their studies and seek employment abroad. And we'll be talking about these three different presentations. So without further ado, I'm very happy to yield the floor for Dr. Youssef Yacoubi. Dr. Youssef Yacoubi is professor and co-director of the Middle Eastern and North African Studies at Setton Hall University in New Jersey. And he will be speaking about pedagogical implications and reflections on the future amid the study abroad and COVID-19. Dr. Yacoubi, thank you for taking the time to be with us, and the floor is yours. Please unmute yourself.
Thank you very much for that kind introduction, and thank you also for your initial reflection, Mr. Oussama, the director of the IES in Rabat. So I'm just going to start straight away because we obviously don't have enough time. So I will try to, my talk will focus on two important points. The first one is to really look at the transformative value of COVID-19, but especially in light of historic events, for example, of the Black Death. I'm just going to take one example that happened in the Middle Ages, which has really shifted the way education is practiced and the way education itself explores the value of knowing reality. And secondly, I will move into cognitive psychology, and this is where I would like to propose some ideas, some possibilities for having for using the experience, this collective experience of COVID-19 as we experience it as a visceral, really, and a psychological experience, to what extent it could allow us to really change our pedagogical choices in the study abroad program. So the argument, so you can test me if I have time, so that I have actually achieved that purpose, that our collective experience should shift the approach to the ways we handle pedagogy itself in the study abroad by adapting what I could call critical realism. And I will explain that in the second section, or the importance of using cognitive psychology and a new form of anthropology. And this has to do more with students and less with the educators. And I will give an example later. So because of the limited time, I'm going to try to be brief. And because this whole question of cognitive psychology and its relationship to international education and strategic planning of study abroad is really complicated and multi-layered. So I'm not going to be exhaustive. So let me begin. So people worry about this pandemic, and they think that it's unusual. Obviously, not many people, but those who think that it's unusual, it's actually linked to so many other events that have been quite significant, paradoxically quite significant, in, on the one hand, unsettling and unnerving many of our habits, educational habits, but at the same time, they have allowed us to take advantage of the crisis and then move on and think creatively about new strategies. So the Black Death, for example, which happened in the 14th century between 1348 and 1350, known as the pestilence or the plague, was quite fatal, very much like COVID-19 in some senses, resulting in deaths up to between 75 to 200 millions in Europe alone. So historians tell us and chronicle how the plague has created religious, social, economic upheavals with profound effects on the course of the European and world history. So in that sense, it was also a global experience or a global pandemic. So this devastation has, according to most historians, has shifted the worldview of people in the 14th century, especially Italy. And this is, in fact, many historians argue, this is really the backbone of the Renaissance, or the emergence of the Renaissance, and a very important sensibility, humanism, right? Humanism, where man is recast as the measure of all things. So this is really a paradigm shift. The Black Death has changed the way education and knowledge itself were perceived and practiced. And in this sense, it's marked an epistemic shift. And as I will explain later in cognitive psychology, I think COVID-19 is likely to allow us that kind of epistemic shift. That is, it really is changing the way we relate to reality. And imagine how students themselves and all of us have been teaching online, have really begun to reconceive their relationship with reality, with education, with knowledge differently. We will see, I suppose, later the full picture. So, as we know, Italy was badly hit by the plague, and the Black Death itself promoted a new wave, as we see, a new wave of piety, for example. The emergence of the idea of the liberal arts actually thrived within this context. So this new thinking is recast in the midst of this pandemic and became manifest in art, in architecture, politics, science, literature, etc. Some of the names that are extremely important in the Middle Ages that have taken advantage, in a sense, of this pandemic. We have, within the Italian context, we have Leonardo da Vinci, we have Michelangelo, the artist, who becomes one of the great men of the period. But these great men were operating within these cultural conditions that come out of the implications of the Black Death. So, in some ways, Renaissance humanism is rooted in a crisis. And I really want to focus on the idea of the crisis. Crisis is a paradoxical thing. A crisis is two things. It's a moment of unease, but it's also an opportunity where things begin to change. So again, back to the idea of a pandemic that has given rise to a new thinking about the liberal arts, the movement to recover, to interpret, to assimilate the language and literature and learning and values, for example, in the context of the Middle Ages, of Greece. So artists and philosophers are starting to think that maybe we've missed something about the past and we need to retrieve the past differently. We need to think afresh. So the pandemics in general, the point I want to make so far, pandemics in general, whether it's the Black Death of the 14th century or even the Spanish flu of 1918, or today, COVID-19, amount to what we know in several disciplines as a crisis, or in Shakespearean language, it's that perturbed spirit, or when the time is out of joint, as Hamlet puts it, time is out of joint. We are so unsettled, we are incapable of really making sense of reality yet. And that's very significant. That crisis is a decisive moment. It's a time of danger and great difficulty, but it's also a time of turning point. This, obviously, as I will explain later, will have implications to the way we run the study abroad programs from a pedagogical and from a psychological point of view. So crisis is transitional. Oussama has introduced us to the possibility that this crisis will stay with us, but I think it will be over. I mean, it will be over. It will take its time, but eventually it will exhaust itself, and then it will be over. So the question then is, what happens next? What is the post-COVID-19 possibility as far as study abroad program is concerned? So some of the new pedagogical strategies must break away with the past. And this is typical of the Renaissance, or any kind of shift from one paradigm into another paradigm. And that is to break away with certain practices and to create a certain updatedness. And then updatedness is that synchrony that we can have between what COVID-19 is actually doing and causing collectively, and then our creative thinking, to what extent we can think creatively so we can come up with fresh ideas and fresh pedagogical practices. So a new thinking must pay attention to the actual changes in our collective value system. So this is very important. The whole value system, and I'm not talking here theologically, I'm talking professionally and practically and also psychologically, that the value system somehow has to shift into something else. That's how we call self-appropriation. So the only way to an appreciation of a true human knowing is self-appropriation. And I will explain this concept of self-appropriation that we can use in the curriculum, we can use in the strategic planning, as Oussama has mentioned itself. It could really be an integral part of a vision, of a new vision, of a post-COVID-19 vision of study abroad. So I base this kind of strategy of self-appropriation, and I'll unpack it more as I speak, from the fact that we need to understand a certain cognitive principle that students begin to understand and relate to knowledge or to another culture, in this case, from experience to begin with, not from some prior knowledge, but from their own experience. In this case, we can capitalize on this collective experience of the COVID-19. So it begins with experience, goes into understanding, into judging, then deliberating, and ultimately deciding. So this fresh way of thinking takes into account these principles of cognitive consciousness. We need to understand how the students can step outside the pre-COVID-19 mindset into another mindset, another consciousness, where experience is the basis of knowing, the basis of developing and appreciating another culture, and appreciating the very experience of moving from the US, for example, into Morocco for a period of time. So I suggest that in case of the study abroad, we obviously, as in the case of Oussama, offering different courses, including language courses. I think this approach applies to all of them, whether it's a content course, or it's a language course. So, so this focuses on one important point, that is the anthropological insights of the students. How do students anthropologically, this is from their own, let's say, ethnographic experience, how do they relate to the other culture from this collective experience? And students, for example, may be required, and this is just a kind of a practical thing, may be required to build a project while they're in the study abroad. This is post, and I know some of my colleagues will deal with COVID-19 as it happens. I'm thinking about the future. I'm thinking about the mission yet to come, the possibilities yet to come. That is the post-COVID-19 potential. We can ask students, for example, to build a project of any course, including a language that integrates their own processes, their own personal processes of knowing and understanding host cultures through this common experience of isolation. We have all been isolated. So the goal of such exercise is to allow the students to personalize, to own the story of crisis and the experience of being themselves, then becoming others who are themselves. That is this sense of alterity in relationship to interiority. So interiority here is not about exploring the egoism of students or pushing them to be more self-centered. It's about allowing that interiority based on the collective experience of the pandemic to make sense in relationship to where they are culturally, that is in the Moroccan context, for example. So it's that dynamic fusion and connection between the two. So I think this is a fundamental strategy we can think about and learn from cognitive psychology in order to update our pedagogical practices.
Dr. Yacoubi, sorry to interrupt you. You have 3 minutes left.
3 minutes. Okay, so I'm going to wrap up. And I want, since I don't have time, I'm going to share with you the process. I have developed it in 4 stages where we can conceive study abroad in terms of the self-appropriation, that is the interiority of the student, allowing the student to think and to implicate themselves as agents of isolation in relationship to others. So I hope you can see the screen. Yes? Are you able to see the screen? Yes?
Yes.
Okay, great. So I have just very briefly. So for example, within the context of actually of either courses, culture courses, history courses, and I know our esteemed professor Yamina teaches one of the great courses, for example, on Amazighi culture. You know, I remember it very well. So either content courses or even language courses. We want to focus on the experience, that is the forms of understanding that come out of this crisis of the students. And then, therefore, the interpretation, we can, as educators, we can lead you know, our teaching in those terms, the interpretation of our coursework, or learning a new language, etc. Is something that students have to deal with. But in addition to that, we can bring students to a level of self-appropriation where they relate their experience at home of COVID-19 in the study abroad context. And then the application of this method, so the quality, so we want to focus on the quality of the students' interiority and their personal investigation of this global issue, how it relates to what they're studying, including a language, because at least, you know, those of us who teach language, we also teach culture, right? Inevitably teach culture. So those two go together. And then to really underscore this idea of insights, because I think crises really produce insights. Now, what are insights? Insights are really very special. It's the aha moment, those moments when something comes up. It comes up usually out of a crisis as well. We want to capitalize on that. So then we also, as we do this as educators, we can compare these different interiorities, these different reflections of international students and how they make sense of them. By the way, it doesn't have to be the topic. It doesn't have to be the topic of the course or part of the course, but I think it's what I'm talking, it's a pedagogical orientation that we have to explore and work with. And so then what I'm also saying here in method 3 is the zone of contact to create between the students, the authors that the students are reading, then of course investigating all of this, including the educator's point of view, because we want to reach a level of authenticity from the point of view of the student, the material that is being studied, and also the educator. And finally, this cognitive method is really about allowing students to see the interplay of COVID-19 forms of knowing, what was happening as you were experiencing the COVID-19, and then how do you represent yourself through others. So here discussing these processes of knowledge, of judgment, and self-appropriation. And ultimately, I finish here by saying that this approach, this cognitive approach, really brings collective revelation. That is, we're thinking together because we're sharing something. But sharing something should not be sentimental. It really should be pedagogically grounded, that it makes sense. We're not going to get together and mourn and cry about what's happening to us. We're going to transfer that knowledge into a common ground of understanding, and especially of moving our experience into a better understanding that is common to all of us. Bringing collective revelations or bringing the different insights. Usually people have insights in moments of crisis, and they will tell you about it. I mean, novels are being written right now about this. So that's what I call the exercise of self approach.
Yacoubi, thank you so very much for this really enlightening presentation. I really like the fact that you're calling for this, what you called vital cognitive strategy, and it should be a strategy. And it's really discovering ourselves in general in the field of study abroad is really a process. So the strategy of self-appropriation that we all can use as educators of international students in order to enrich and continue to enrich their personal and intellectual and spiritual growth is really, really very important. So thank you very much for taking the time to tackle this. And our next speaker is going to speak about how creative we can be. I'm glad to introduce quickly, without further ado, Dr. Salah Ayari. Salah Ayari is an instructional associate professor at the Texas A&M University in Texas. Thank you very much for being here, Dr. Ayari. And he's going to speak about teaching through the coronavirus, foreign language instructors' challenges, and how they can adjust through online courses. Dr. Ayari, if you're ready, I'll yield the floor to you.
Yes, I'm ready, and I need to share my screen.
Dr. Youssef, can you please end screen sharing? Please, thank you.
So we'll just need to have Dr. Yacoubi stop sharing his screen so that Dr. Ayari can share his. Thank you, stop. But we did. Looks like it's popping up. Yes, we can see it.
Okay. All right. So I'm going to share with you how the Arabic program at Texas A&M responded to the outbreak of the pandemic and the subsequent cancellation of the study abroad programs, and how our program saw in this challenge an opportunity to be creative, as Dr. Yacoubi just mentioned in his presentation. And so I'm going to talk about conducting a virtual experience for students to study in Morocco. Just to give you a little background, we have, or we had this year, 27 students from Texas A&M who had registered for the 2020 Morocco Arabic Institute. And most of those students needed to conduct this experience for graduation. And so you can only imagine how disappointed they were when they suddenly heard that the program has been canceled like all other programs. And so from there, we got a request from the Associate Dean to start planning for an online course to teach those students so that they can complete the graduation requirement. And we were also told that we should include an international component. Now, what that means is up to anybody's creativity. So we had to come up with some sort of international component as we teach those online courses to our students. And luckily, in my case, I had some experience with doing not online teaching, but incorporating distance learning for the students so that they can experience the language and the culture as part of the learning the Arabic language. So I wanted to talk a little bit about how the study abroad program has been an integral part of the Arabic language program at Texas A&M. So we had been conducting this program for 11 years now, starting with 2009 in Tunis, and then Morocco, and then Morocco again, and then in Jordan. So it's been shifting from different countries, but I think most of it has been conducted in Morocco. For some kind of bias on my side, I think I enjoy Morocco and love it, and the students also like it. So we had an average of 22 students per year that participated in the study abroad program. It's been a very stable and successful program. And we anticipate that it will continue to be so, despite the challenge that we are facing now. So what do students value the most about their study abroad experience? We always get feedback from the students when they complete the program in the summer to see how they felt and how they evaluate their performance. And so two reasons: obviously the language fluency. Students appreciate the opportunity to interact with locals. They stay with host families, and they get a chance to speak to people regularly at the center that hosts us, the IES Center. And also, students have an opportunity to immerse themselves in the culture through the host family experience. And so those are the two aspects that made it so attractive to our students. And so the question is, how is that reflected in their performance? So we look at the language fluency, because that's something that students value the most. Their language performance improves. What's the proof? I've been looking at the data since 2017, 3 years data, before the program and after the program. So we measure language fluency or language proficiency by the oral proficiency interview. That's a national test that measures how well a person speaks a language. So we use it to measure the growth in language performance and fluency. And you can see how the student performance jumps from beginning level. The blue is the beginning level or the novice level to the intermediate level. Most of our students jump from the novice to the intermediate level, and that's been consistently so since we started looking at their test scores in 2017. So there is proof that students improve linguistically because of this study abroad experience. So the question is, how can we maintain this exposure? How can we bring an opportunity for the students to interact with locals, with people face to face, so that they can continue to grow linguistically? And the other aspect of this study abroad experience is the cultural competence. We measure cultural competence by the intercultural development inventory, and we look at students' journals. So students, after they complete or before they end the program, they write reflection journals. And we look at those journals to see how they experience the culture. And it's been consistently so that students jump from the stage of denial or polarization, those stages where students feel like they have little or no knowledge about the target culture, about the Moroccan culture, and they tend to think of in terms of we versus them because of their limited knowledge. And by the end of the program, many of them or most of them get to the stage of minimization, where they get to see the similarity. They get to see the similarity of the Moroccan culture with the American culture, that American families are not very different from American families. That Moroccan people are welcoming and generous, and they share, and they are very nice, and all of these things come up in their journals. And so students get to the point where they feel like, we thought that Morocco would be very different from America, but it's not really that different. And even the different aspects of Morocco, we also appreciate. There is a difference, but we accept the difference. That's acceptance stage. There's nothing wrong with being different. So students get to that stage, and we feel that's a very significant progress. That's the benefits of study abroad. So the question is, what aspects of the study abroad experience, both linguistically and culturally, could be offered virtually? How can we maintain that exposure?
And Dr. Ayari, you have 5 minutes left. Thank you. I think we lost Dr. Ayari. Looks like that for some reason we lost him. Amine, can we check? Oh, can we check if we have him back? It looks like we have a little technical problem here. Hopefully, Dr. Ayari is trying to reconnect to Zoom so that we can continue to be live on Facebook. We'll wait for 30 seconds. If he's still facing any difficulty, we may just opt for moving to the next speaker and maybe have him wrap up later when he comes back. I'll just see the time to say that please feel free to continue to post your comments and questions because we're not using Zoom for everyone because we had so many people registered, so that would definitely slow the connectivity and the net flow. So please feel free to leave your comments and questions on Facebook. And it looks like that we have Dr. Salah Ayari back.
I apologize.
Your presentation was interrupted. Please feel free to continue. Carry on.
I apologize for the interruption.
No problem.
I'm very sorry again. So I was talking about how to maintain or how to virtually offer or expose students to Moroccan language and culture. And so I wanted to share an initiative that, or a joint project that I shared with my colleague, Dr. Yamina Al-Qirati from the University of Mohamed V in Rabat. A few months ago, I approached her to ask if she could ask her students who are getting training to teach Arabic language to work with my students as language partners. And so students were, there were 10 students from the University of Rabat, of Mohamed V in Rabat, who started conducting online dardasha with my students. And we thought that would serve both sides. The Moroccan teachers would gain some experience teaching online. Since they are pre-service teachers, they would benefit from that experience of lesson planning and executing their lessons and interacting with students at the novice level That's not an easy task. And my students also would get a chance to talk to Moroccan teachers and Moroccan people and practice their language skills. There were some challenges about that because of, namely because of the connection, but most of the experience has been successful. And so I was very pleased that my students were able to give projects to share their experience. So we have students who videotape themselves talking to Moroccan teachers, and another students gave a PowerPoint presentation about their experience. Overall, I think the students enjoyed themselves, and they gained more confidence, as these students cited here. The conversation sessions greatly strengthened not only my vocabulary, but also my confidence in speaking Arabic. Even though it was a serious academic experience, I still had a lot of fun and would find myself laughing every time I sat down to talk with my language partner. I wanted to highlight the notion of confidence. That's the purpose of being able to interact directly with native speakers outside of the classroom environment, is to gain confidence, not to be afraid to talk. And that's the benefit of study abroad. Students are find themselves interacting and talking to locals, and they gain confidence as they do so, and they enjoy it. And so that's something that I was able to maintain through this online Dardasha program. And so just to conclude, I think this experience with Dardasha, online Dardasha, that's been quite successful, both last semester with Dr. Al-Qirati's students, and in the past has encouraged me to actually consider doing more of it by working with IES in Rabat. They graciously and generously offered to give my students a tour, a virtual tour of the center, to talk to them and to record. That's the main thing. I wanted to record conversations with Moroccan friends. I have a lot of friends, vast network of friends, both in the States and in Morocco, that I wanted to tap in and record some conversations with Moroccans who would talk about their families and their lives in Morocco and the cities. And so students would listen to those conversations and get to practice their language. Also, those friends, those colleagues offered to join us during the Zoom sessions, which will start next week, to interact with my students and share with them not only the language, but also the culture, talk about different Moroccan cities, different historical sites, landmarks, music, art, history. Students would be able to interact with them to learn about Morocco. So in a nutshell, I think not being able to go to Morocco gave me a chance to explore new ways, to explore creative ways for my students to also interact with Moroccan people, watch videos, different videos about history, about culture. And I'm hoping that, this experience would open up, as Dr. Yacoubi mentioned, new and creative ways of teaching or conducting study abroad programs.
Dr. Ayari, thank you very much. I think we're really beating the time here. That's excellent. Are you done, Dr. Ayari, with your presentation?
Yes, I am done, and I'm going to stop sharing.
All right. Well, thank you very much again for your presentation. Thank you for sharing the virtual trip to Morocco initiative. That's really creative, and I totally believe and agree that that's one wonderful way to maximize language learning, intercultural competence, and maintain students' interest in study abroad in the future, as you mentioned. Again, thank you very much. And without further ado, we'll move quickly to our next speaker, Dr. Elias Bensalem. Dr. Elias Bensalem also has extensive experience with study abroad and leading faculty of the program abroad too. Thank you for being here, Dr. Bensalem. Dr. Bensalem's presentation is going to be more about the challenges and ways to adjust with online courses amid the coronavirus crisis. Dr. Bensalem, if you're ready, the floor is yielded to you.
Well, thank you so much for the opportunity that you're giving me to share my personal experience and the experience of other colleagues regarding the challenges that we've been facing since the coronavirus problem started. As corona spreads, worldwide, schools are forced to temporarily shut down, and many have moved to online education, as we all know. The sudden shift from face-to-face to online delivery mode can be a challenge for many teachers, especially those who have no experience with virtual learning. So teachers were left scrambling to figure out how to make online pedagogy as effective and satisfying as the in-person version.
Dr. Bensalem, I'm sorry to interrupt you. Are you comfortable with sharing your video, or is that?
I don't have a reliable connection, and I'm afraid that the video will be stuttering. That's why I'm using.
Fair enough. Fair enough. Sorry to interrupt you. Carry on.
Okay, no problem. So when we talk about online learning, there are two modes: the synchronous and asynchronous mode. The synchronous mode requires simultaneous participation of students and teachers at the same time, so real time. And this is what I've been doing the past semester. And I'm personally using Blackboard as a learning platform. Some other teachers are involved in asynchronous learning. Basically, students can choose a personal time frame in which to connect to the course. Asynchronous is more flexible, but it doesn't really have the warm atmosphere that face-to-face communication brings. But whether you are involved in synchronous or asynchronous learning, there are plenty of challenges that most likely you'll be facing, and you have to find a way to overcome those challenges. The challenges are mostly technical, pedagogical, and I'll highlight some of these challenges. Regarding the technical challenges, learning the technology itself, the technology that's required to teach an online course is cited as the most common challenge, especially for non-techie teachers. Most of them have received no training actually in online teaching. So you need to have technical skills in order to create instructional videos or materials for your courses. That's just one challenge. Another challenge is that online courses have been found to be highly subject to technical issues. Result systems not functioning properly, updates sometimes can lead to existing materials and systems not working, formatting issues. Personally, I had some of these challenges this semester. Students, would submit their assignments and I couldn't open the attachments. So, unfortunately, as a teacher, you have to be able to troubleshoot, which is a skill that also you need to successfully, manage these challenges. What solution for that? You have to use the resources available through the school and university. This can include reaching out to technical support, or you have to find a way to solve the problems yourself. Based just by my experience and experience of my colleagues, most teachers are self-taught professionals and rely on themselves to, troubleshoot. The other kind of challenges is of pedagogical nature. The reality is that a teacher who is good at face-to-face teaching is not always able to switch to online teaching because of differences in teaching context. These are two different contexts. Face-to-face is totally different from online. Several skills shift in their importance and implementation in online course. The skills we're talking about, how often and by what means you communicate with your students, how and by what means you provide feedback, the way you structure and facilitate student-to-student interaction. These skills shift considerably when you move to online environment. And again, most cases, online teachers don't have appropriate training regarding these teaching practices in online environment. Some people or some colleagues were given about 3-4 days to start teaching online. And the number one challenge is that how do I remain visibly present and engaged in my online class? That was the number one challenge. And there are tips or things that we as instructors can do to cope with this new situation. If you're not teaching via video conferencing, you can post a weekly announcement to provide overview of the coming week's topic or a recap of the previous week's work, or both. You can post a quick video to clarify misconceptions about the class topic or assignment. This is something that you can do. You can also talk with students in online discussions and encourage their participation. You can respond to questions, post an online question answer discussion forum, or send to you by email. You can hold online office hours according to a schedule by appointment or both. These are certain things that you can do to maintain your presence and engagement in your online course. There is also a special attention adjustment to the materials that you're delivering to students. You really need to make sure you check the materials thoroughly before posting them online. Want to make sure that there are no problems with those materials. All files are not correct, especially if you are giving assignments. Your online materials themselves, they have to be appealing. Otherwise, you're going to lose those students. Students be very hard to motivate in class, let alone in online environment where they'd be listening to your lecture, maybe from the kitchen. So in order to do that, try to use, visuals, media interactive tools, and learning activities. And this, again, requires some technical skills. Try to get to learn more about your learning management software or whatever program that you're using. And if you do that, it will help you a lot when it comes to getting students involved. As I said, I'm using Blackboard, so I have the luxury of doing random group activities. I can put students randomly in groups and involve them in activities. I have also the option of setting up a threaded discussion. So I try to make use of those tools in order to engage students as much as possible. One of the challenges is how to avoid students' confusion. In a face-to-face environment, when you have an assignment, you can explain it different ways. You can answer students' questions. But if you give an assignment online, sometimes the directions are not as clear as you want them to be. So make sure that the directions that you are putting are very clear and not read like a textbook. They have to be very simple and straightforward, as if you're having conversation with a student. Sometimes you need to create like informal 2-minute explainer video to flesh out some details of an assignment. Sometimes you have to do that. Of course, you need to provide a rubric. And one of the things that I see that it's a very good practice is to share an example of student work that earned top marks, and maybe even share an example of mediocre work so students can compare the two. The whole objective is to make sure students don't have to guess what you want them as an instructor to do. And this is part of the support that you have to provide as an instructor. Communication challenge is huge. It's just huge because if you don't communicate effectively with your students, they're not going to have a good learning experience. And this may result in really losing interest in the course by itself. So make sure that you get involved and make sure that your students know the best methods and times to contact you. Because as I said, not having a teacher present can make some students nervous. And try to relax them by answering questions in a timely manner and providing instructions and comments on a regular basis. I mean, that's really important. Keeping student motivation is really a challenge because some students are self-motivated, others may not be motivated as much. I personally try to keep my students motivated by giving them extra credit for online discussion. So those students who discuss or are involved in online discussions, they get an extra credit, and that really helps me get as many students as possible involved in the course. Sometimes I set deadlines and I'm strict about them, but at the same time flexible because of technical issues. But setting up deadlines can help, promote, your more unmotivated students. Based again on the feedback I got from other colleagues, conveying positivity and optimism that students can succeed is a huge component of online course. So you want to demonstrate compassion and caring for your online students. Don't be too dry and be threatening. If you don't complete, I see that you're not completing your assignments. If you don't, submit those assignments online, you're gonna have an F. Instead, you can simply be more compassionate, saying, I can see that you have problems, complete on your assignment. If there is anything I can do to help you, please let me know. That can go a long way. It can help, struggling students. There are other challenges that I can talk about, but given the limited amount of time that I have, but I just simply say that other challenges can be related to cheating, plagiarism, and this is a huge headache. And personally, it's bothered me a lot with the students not, sticking to the rules and regulations when it comes to doing their own work and not seeking the help of others and everything. To conclude, one of the best practices that helped me a lot personally is to reach out to my colleagues and visit many of the forums. The forums have been very helpful. They provide, support and tips and resources. And echoing what Dr. Youssef has said, this can be an opportunity to reshape our pedagogical practices, and maybe moving forward will be looking more into blended learning as the norm in the near future when this pandemic is over. But overall, I think that with proper preparation, experience, and positive mentality, I think all these challenges and others can be overcome. And thank you.
Well, thank you very much for staying on time. You again needed the time here as usual. Thank you very much for sharing your observations and for talking about the impact of this sudden shift from face-to-face to online delivery mode and how it could be a big challenge for many teachers. But thank you very much also for sharing the excellent tips. I know that we have among our audience today a lot of people, a lot of teachers and instructors. So hopefully we'll all benefit from that. Again, thank you very much. And so now our next speaker is going to be Amine Mechaal. Amine Mechaal is our academics and customized programs manager here at IES Abroad, and has done a great job. So hopefully he'll speak a little bit of his experience as well. But the title of his presentation is going to be Evaluating Emergency Remote Instruction. He does not call it online teaching yet. He sticks to the title Emergency Remote Instructions. He's going to tell us why. He's going to speak about that, and I'll leave the floor for him without further ado. Amine, thank you for being here. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Addouli. Please first allow me to thank you and to thank Dr. Kirat for helping coordinate and organize this webinar. And I would also like to thank our speakers who are joining us from different parts of the world. And this webinar reflects the spirit of study abroad, which is getting exposed to these cross-geographical perspectives, thoughts, ideas, etc. And I'm really happy and honored to be amongst you today. Well, as Mr. Addouli mentioned in my presentation, or through my presentation, I have one main rationale that I would like to achieve or talk about, which is to invite everyone to reconsider the term online teaching in what we are doing, which we have been doing for the past 3 months during this pandemic, because it's very unjust and unfair to evaluate professors and also students learning based on the fact that they were thought to be doing online teaching while they were doing emergency remote instruction. And in my presentation, I will talk about the difference between online teaching and emergency remote instruction, and what are the criteria for each one, the context, etc. And also, I will share with you some of my findings from a study that I'm conducting, that I'm currently conducting. It's still ongoing, but I will just share with you some numbers so that you can, reflect on them. My presentation is mainly to provoke our thoughts, to invite us to think and to start a debate about this topic of online teaching versus emergency remote instruction. So first, allow me to share my screen. Yes.
We're not counting this time, so no worries. Popped up. We can see you.
Okay. Great. Okay. So let me make it bigger. So as you saw on the poster, and as you can see now, my presentation is an evaluation of emergency remote instruction amid COVID-19 pandemic for study abroad students and also instructors. However, my presentation can also touch other levels, other fields within the higher education. So online teaching versus emergency remote teaching or instruction. Whenever we are talking about online teaching, we talk about three main components. The number one component is teaching. We need to have teachers, of course, who have the online experience. We need to have learners who signed up for these online courses. And then the third and the main important thing is design, the online course design. When we talk about design, we talk about modality, we talk about pacing, we talk about pedagogy, we talk about evaluation and online assessment. And what we know from research is that effective online learning results from careful instructional design and planning and development. The design process and the careful consideration of the different design decisions that we make have an impact on the quality of the instruction. And it is this careful design again that's or that will be absent in the remote or emergency remote instruction. So that's actually the main and most important difference, and it actually affects a lot of the findings that we find whenever we conduct an evaluation of the past 3 months in terms of online teaching and online learning, both for professors and for students. Also, when we talk about online teaching, we talk about this mutual consent between the professors and also the students, meaning that if I'm a student and I think that my learning style is compatible with the online format of the course and that I'm actually going to be learning from that online course, then I decide to join it. And also for professors, I mean, professors who do online teaching must train at least in dealing with the different technological platforms or supports that we use in online teaching. Number two, like again, the course design, like we should have a course design that is only meant to be used in online teaching. Syllabus must be revisited and everything else. So this thing is very important to consider when talking about online teaching. And again, this wasn't the case in the past 3 months because we were rushed and I would say forced by the coronavirus to switch to the online teaching or online instructions. Students did not sign up to this when they first chose to study abroad. And also professors did not sign up for this when they decided to teach in a study abroad program. So again, and this means that professors are not actually well prepared, both mentally or even like logistically to deliver those online courses. And students, they might have learning styles that disable them from learning from such online courses. So just to move quickly, I will present some data from the study I told you about. So I conducted this study using a sample population of 21 content courses plus or language professors from Morocco, Jordan, Egypt, and Tunisia, who taught in study abroad programs during the COVID-19 pandemic. The average age of these participants is 50. And we used like questionnaires. It's a quantitative data collection method. We used Snowball, and also there is self-reported. There is also self-reported data because of my involvement in study abroad programs as well. And this research or this study is still ongoing, meaning that we're still gathering the data. The first slide presents quick numbers. So let's just look at these numbers and reflect on them. So we have 40% of professors who answered the questionnaire, who filled out the questionnaire, felt prepared in moving all learning, teaching, and assessment online. Well, that's a low percentage given the fact that a lot of, if not all of professors had to switch to online teaching. We have 50% of professors who were confident in their ability to facilitate online learning, teaching, and assessment. And we have 75% of professors who require training in using technological online teaching support. And if there is one thing that this crisis taught us is that, or showed us, is that there is a dire need for more training in using information communication technologies and in using online teaching platforms, or just platforms like online platforms that are used in education in general. So we have 80% of professors offered live and interactive session, meaning that there is another 20% of professors who opted for other social media, who maybe Facebook, maybe WhatsApp, who were posting recordings of their lectures online for their students, or who were running their classes on one of these social media. And the last number is 100% of professors were satisfied with their performance in online teaching towards the end of the semester. Again, this is a very, I would say, pessimistic number since all professors who participated in this study felt this way. However, I would say that there are a lot of other observers or people who are involved in this process who might have another opinion, like study abroad program managers or students themselves. But it's good that professors felt that they actually did a great job during this pandemic. In this figure, it shows students' attendance of recorded sessions in due period, because all the study abroad programs that we talk to, they have like a period of time between 2 days to 4 days for students to watch the recorded video. So if they were absent, so they had to watch it within a period of 4 days. And this this is from March 23rd through April 12th, about three weeks. So in this figure, if you can see, there is a drop of students viewing of the recorded sessions in the first week, and this is the week where most universities, if not all, US universities have been asking their students to return back to the US because of the pandemic spreading very fast in some countries. And during this period too, a lot of those programs were doing or administering exams, midterm exams. And also during this period, a lot of those study abroad programs were evacuating students and sending them back to their home universities and countries. In the second week, you can see that the percentage is going higher until it reaches 100%, meaning that students now are back to the States and they are in a more comfortable position to study remotely. In the second figure, we have students' attendance, but this time of live sessions per class from April 6th through May 10th. And this is from one of the study abroad program providers that are involved in this study. So as you can see, these are different courses, content courses or language courses. And you can see that there are some courses who scored 100% percentage of live attendance of students, while other recorded 0, others 10%, 30, 20, as you can see. And if we want to analyze this, we can also talk about the fact that students went back to the United States, meaning that we have students who are placed in different geographic zones, different time zones, and also like we have a huge time difference between these countries, Morocco, Tunisia, Jordan, and Egypt, and the United States. So it was very difficult, and I'm telling you this also from my experience in to coordinate these classes or the timing for these classes given this time zone differences. And we can also maybe talk about the professors' ability to deliver an interesting or a fun class that will hook students and that will make them want to attend it live and interact. Because when I talked to many of those professors, I was asking about what are the things that you were using, like online support, like technological supports that you were using, and what are the features within those platforms, online teaching platforms that you were using. And it was mainly screen sharing and also chat, instant chat, and of course the live video and audio. So there are many other features that were not used whether at all or appropriately by those professors who are involved in this study. Well, like I said, the most important thing for us now is to know that what we have been doing in the past 3 months is not necessarily online teaching. It's rather emergency remote teaching. And this again will help us better evaluate our professors. And actually this emergency remote teaching is not new. It's something that has been there for a very long time, and it has been used mainly during disasters, during natural disasters, during wars, during crises in some countries. But the only difference is that now it's happening at a larger scale. That's why it is important to talk about it. And when you talk about emergency remote teaching or instruction, you don't talk about all the other things that we mentioned for online teaching and that are related mainly to the design and the formats of the online course. So it's just our professors did their best to keep giving the information to their students using different platforms, different techniques, and we should really, I mean, this is a message also to students, since there are a lot of students who are watching us. Please understand that your professors were undergoing a lot of pressure, and they were doing their best to give you the courses in the best formats available and with the provided pedagogical or technical supports that they could have. And I yield the floor back to you, Mr. Oussama. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Amine Mechaal, for your presentation. I would be very interested to know the final outcomes and recommendations of your research when it's all complete. Well, again, thank you very much for your thoughts and for also the tips that you mentioned. And I think it's really time now to leave the floor for Dr. Yamina Kirat Allame from the University of Mohamed V to speak about also lessons for the future. So that's what her presentation is going to be about. And thank you very much for taking the time, Dr. Kirat, and thank you for joining me in organizing this first webinar. Dr. Kirat is professor, and she's also an international consultant and advisor in the field of higher education. And she's going to speak about what she calls international programs in distance learning in light of the COVID-19 crisis, challenges and lessons for the future. So without further ado, I'll leave the floor for Dr. Kirat. And please unmute yourself.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Addouli, for the opportunity to, of course, for the idea. Actually, I should admit that the idea was yours, and I joined in the preparation of this webinar. Thank you all to all colleagues who have prepared the ground for my discussion. And because I am the last speaker, I would like to end on a very, very positive note. So I would consider this pandemic as an opportunity that would open new horizons for education. And I think that the COVID-19 pandemic has changed education forever. The fact that we are holding this webinar now is an evidence for the fact that we have already started reflecting on how to improve the situation. I thank all the colleagues because actually we will have to change our pedagogies. This is an opportunity as well to reflect on our practices, on our teachers' training, and to consider a number of our system of education. And of course, given my profile and because of the experience I have both at the international level with IES and my experience at the local level at Mohamed V University in Rabat, gives me the opportunity and the chance to look and compare the two experiences, of course. Just very briefly, I would like to thank Amine for having really referred to the fact that what we have gone through and what all teachers have been going through was not a personal choice. So neither the teachers nor the students have chosen to take what I would call distance learning, because actually this is how it is, because there is no direct contact most of the time with the students, especially when we refer to some systems of education. And when I refer in particular to the Moroccan experience with this distance learning. And of course, I would like to thank IES for having really put the means into providing us with a very, I can say, I can qualify it compared to the other means provided as an efficient means for delivering our classes, because actually they were interactive, and despite all the challenges, I think that we managed to satisfy the students' need to a great extent. Just very briefly, just as Professor Yacoubi went back to the history of humanity, I would like to refer to the fact that distance learning is not a new concept. And I would like to remind you all of the CNED, which is the National Center for Distance Learning associated with France, Paris, which got created actually in 1939. And of course, as a reaction to the Second World War. And of course, it got created by the government, French government, so as to provide education given the hard conditions in the aftermath of the Second World War. This distance learning center, of course, kept evolving, adopting different measures, of course, revising its strategies. And just for you to know that on the 13th of March, 2020, that is during this pandemic, the distance learning was made, of course, as on the internet. It was made on the internet in 1977, but on the 13th of March, it was really meant to provide distance learning to all French people because of the closing of schools. So as Professor Yacoubi said that pressure produces insight, or crisis produces insights, I can say that pressure makes diamonds, actually. This pressure that that this pandemic is putting on us is leading us to think together. I have organized my presentation in the light of two main questions, actually, that were announced by Amine and El Addouli. How did students and teachers adapt to the instant switch to the distance learning? And I think that, of course, even though they had no choice to really, both teachers and students did not choose to provide distance learning, first evaluation, and we should take into consideration this variable of choice. I mean, I would like it to take it into consideration in the analysis. So this is a very, very important variable. If we take this into consideration, I think that people have managed the situation quite well. Of course, apart from the challenges that of accessibility to internet, especially when I refer to Morocco, where rural areas, students, even the university students living in rural areas, were not able to have access to courses because of the lack of internet connection. The same phenomenon actually happened even with IES Abroad students. I had some students in my class telling me about the problems they were having with internet connection. So actually, technologies and accessibility to internet in particular is one of the main challenges maybe for distance learning. What I would like to refer to is the experience actually I have faced myself with international programs. And you know that actually Erasmus programs provide mobility for students and teachers. And I would like here to insist on students' mobility. And I can say that, of course, it was very, very difficult to manage the students' mobility at the advent of the pandemic, and that, of course, whether it is incoming or outgoing mobility, for instance, we had serious problems for the evacuation of our students, and after they came back, it was really very difficult to get distance learning. The other thing is that the opposite is that we had some European students and we offered distance learning. And the problem was that their universities did not want to consider distance learning. So I think that there is an issue with outdated academic policies. And that, for instance, I had two students from, there is no need to mention the country, who told me, I'm going to drop the class because my university said that we have no actually predispositions, or there is no law that makes it that we accept distance learning classes. So you see a little bit, if we want to consider, and from this I will move to, because of time constraint, I would like to move to the future. What is the future of study abroad programs in the light of the COVID-19? Of course, I'm looking at it not only from the perspective of study abroad program, but I'm looking at it from a global perspective, even the international programs that offer grants for students' mobilities. Now, with this sudden shift actually away from the classroom in many parts of the globe, we have started to wonder whether the adoption of online or distance learning will continue to persist post-pandemic, and how such a shift would impact the worldwide education market. Actually, this is a discussion we have already started at IES, and we are already thinking of even reflecting on offering distance learning courses. Yeah, true, Mr. Addouli. And the other question, of course, the same question actually can be asked even for Moroccan universities. And now, what does this mean for the future of learning as well? And now, while some people believe that the unplanned and rapid move to distance learning with no training, and this has been highlighted by all the speakers, that is no training, teachers received no training, students had no idea about how to interact via distance learning, and little preparation will result in poor user experience that is unconducive to sustained growth, others believe, of course. And of course, a new hybrid model, people think that there is maybe a new hybrid model of education will emerge. And Professor Ayari has referred to the fact that he was combining both face-to-face education and online learning. And this has made the move for him to distance learning with the program he is now working on somehow smoother. And I think that, of course, I believe that the integration of information technology in education will be accelerated, and that online education will eventually become an integral component of school education in general and higher education in particular. And with this, of course, given my interest in the issue of the internationalization of higher education in general, and in Morocco in particular, I think that the discussion now being open on distance learning, and given all the actually pressures and constraints set by students' mobility, and the cost of the actually students' mobility, I think that this is an opportunity for universities to consider developing distance learning programs for international students. But of course, this will require a lot of investment, contrary to the past, where investments used to be in building, in providing the infrastructure and so on. Now it will be in, of course, the new technologies. And I think that the universities at the global level have a lot to gain from thinking seriously of developing distance learning, because actually there are already a number of universities, both in the US and other developed countries, where online courses are provided. That is, it's a complete online course. And I would like here refer with the course being delivered, but also the evaluation itself is online and distant, at a distance. And here, one of the actually worries quality assurance people have is with respect to what Professor Elias has referred to about cheating and plagiarism on the part of the students. So I think that this is really an opportunity for us all to think about how to adopt the adapt to the new context, and how to seize this opportunity and the experience we have had with distance learning now to invest into developing programs, international programs, and of course, ICT infrastructure investment is capital. Actually, this was not only a challenge for developing countries such as Morocco, but it was also actually a challenge for even developed countries, and we did face some challenges even with our IES Abroad students. So I think that there should be tools for a type of blended learning and what we can call hybrid courses, so as to be prepared, because no one can actually at this moment or at this time predict when the pandemic will be over. And this, of course, is pushing authorities. For instance, in Morocco, the minister has recently sent a note asking of course, to the president of the universities, asking them to, of course, recommend the teachers to be ready and prepare their distance learning courses for the fall semester, which means that actually we are not sure the pandemic will be over and by the fall semester. And I think that we should think seriously of now how to make of this distance learning a choice. And I think that we have time to prepare for distance learning ahead of time, and that through, of course, adopting the course, the same course, the right course design, the right syllabus. Because actually, when we started distance learning with IES, I personally had to revise and review a lot of my stuff and change a number of activities in my class so as to adapt to a distance learning experience. So I think I am, with this, I think that this is an opportunity to reflect on our practices, on the way we train our teachers. And actually, this is one of the main challenges we faced in the Moroccan system of education at all levels. Teachers were not trained, and I here would like to commend actually the efforts of all the teachers who have actually, in the lack and the absence of softwares, have resorted to social media. Many of our colleagues have resorted to Facebook to teach their students, to WhatsApp. I've been following a very small school in a rural area using WhatsApp, and it's really a lot of work for the teachers. But still, I think that man can be creative under pressure, and I think that the pressure that the pandemic has set on us all has made us really think, reflect, not only on the educational level, but it has pushed people at all levels reconsider their practices, their way of behaving, at the environment level, at the economic level, at the social level. So I think that this is an opportunity, and we should start from here now. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you very, very much, Dr. Kirat, for your presentation and for also mentioning your experience from managing and working with other international programs, especially in the public system, and also mentioning, the other experiences and what the government, Moroccan government, is doing. And also thank you for being very active in our IES courses as well. Well, by this presentation, I would really like to thank each and every one of you. I think that was really great. I don't think we have any questions, but it's clear that we had a really very nice turnout. And We invite our audience again to please leave your comments even later. I know that a lot of people who've registered to see through Zoom to watch this webinar have other commitments, so many of them may leave their comments later. I'll make sure to share that as well. But if nobody has oh, okay, it looks like I mean, so before reading your question, I mean, I just want to again, I really like the Dr. Yacoubi's idea of how what you call the vital cognitive strategy made it vital, vital for the self-appropriation that we can use as educators, as people working in study abroad and international educator, to continue to enrich the students' personal, intellectual, and spiritual growth, especially that we're dealing with Generation Z. And this really reminded me of the an essay or an article that was published by Jeffrey Centeno on learning to be. It's called Learning to Be. And it talks about the, it refers to the transcendental philosophy of education towards an integral human existence, and how transcendental philosophy refers to the activity of the self as a knowing subject seeking itself through personal appropriation of one's own rational self-consciousness. And it's really, if we look at what we do in general in study abroad, is really not only giving opportunities for students to further your education, to get insights, to challenge themselves, but also to allow them to give them an opportunity for discovering the self. I think that when you study abroad and you go through these different challenges, what happens is that you discover yourself. And study abroad actually accelerates that process of discovering the self. And I really liked it. And I think that a lot of what our faculty do, our staff, is really help Generation Z students, especially with the new interests and the changes of interest that we're seeing, to really discover themselves and obviously become better citizens of the world, as we like to call them. So, so thank you for your very enlightening presentation, and thank you also for Dr. Ayari for all the tips, and for Dr. Bensalem for the different mentioning the different tips as well, and for Dr. Kirat's insights as well. I mean, it looks like we have another question.
Yeah, we have a question from Jamila Shahboon. Jamila Shahboon is teaching Arabic at Dartmouth College. She's saying, thank you for this informative webinar. My question is addressed to Dr. Ayari. Did you teach fully online or in a hybrid format this term? What makes this format worthwhile? Could you please share some of your best practices? Thank you.
I have to admit that I have limited experience with online teaching, because I did not feel the need at the time. But one thing we've done consistently for the last couple of semesters was to allow our students to conduct online dardasha, or conversation, with native speakers from Morocco and even from Jordan. And so we would put them, in touch, and ask that they meet at least once a week to converse about different topics. And the students would report back during class about what they learned about their conversation partners. And at the end of the semesters, they would give a presentation. They would give a 15-minute presentation about what they learned about the country and their language partners. And so that has been quite successful and has been integrated in our curriculum. It's been part of my grades, that students have to conduct an online dardasha session on a weekly basis in order to improve their fluency and some aspects of the culture from Jordan and or Morocco. Now, after the pandemic outbreak, of course, there was no choice, like Dr. Al-Karati mentioned. We had to do it. And I felt like I was prepared in a sense, because those online dardasha sessions are still available for us. we're going to be using them to invite native speakers to join us and both give presentations and conduct interactive sessions with my students. So I'm thinking to make it even more integral part of my curriculum in the future, is to have speakers from different countries, and especially from Morocco, join us to share, the culture and the language. And this is very important because the vast majority of our students don't travel. Texas A&M has 70,000 people, 70,000 students, only 5,500 people travel each year. What about the rest? They're either incapable or unwilling to travel. And so now we can bring the world to them. We can incorporate them. We can make them share the taste of those countries that they are not able to or willing to travel to.
Well, thank you very much, Dr. Ayari, for your answer. Amine, do we have another question?
Yes, we have another question, this time from Dr. Imouri Mustafa. Okay, and I will quote. We can only acknowledge that the presenters have addressed issues as we practitioners aim to share at a larger scale. Still, many other challenges to be considered in future webinars, mainly the impact of the apps and platforms used as part of our pedagogics on students' learning. Which ones are good for delivering content courses and which ones are good for delivering language courses? So Professor Imouri is asking which platforms are better to teach, whether content or language courses. From my experience at IES Abroad and with other classes of my friends and colleagues, I can say that we have Big Blue Button. It's not as famous as Zoom or Google Meets or Teams, but I would say for me, and having worked on all other platforms, I think that Big Blue Button is the best so far for delivering both content and language courses, and mainly language courses, because as we indulge in this remote instruction experience, we had problems more with language professors or instructors than with content courses. Why? Because we need, especially in beginning levels, because we needed to teach students how to write alphabets. We needed to see their writing. We needed to give them the chance to write, and so that other classmates can see it, etc. So it was actually very beneficial to have used Big Blue Button. I would say that Zoom can work perfectly for content courses. For language classes, it depends on the instructor, and I think Moodle is also a good platform, but again, there are many other platforms that work within Moodle. So Moodle is the main platform, but that you can use to communicate with your students, to post your courses, etc. But again, there are embedded applications like Zoom, like Big Blue Button, Google Meets, etc. that can be like working from Moodle and within Moodle, and you can post recorded sessions online as soon as you end them. So,
did anybody use any different electronic platforms rather than Moodle and BBB?
I'm using Blackboard.
Okay.
Blackboard has nice features, but I don't think it's a free software, so you have to have subscription. That's the only problem with Blackboard. If your institution has Blackboard, it's a good platform, but if you don't have a subscription, obviously you can't use it. There is even no trial period for using Blackboard, but has a lot of nice features. You can record your session, make it available to students. You can invite collaborators. You can do a random group assignment. You can do a thread discussion. There is a great management system built in Blackboard, so students can keep track of their grades, their progress. I mean, it's really a comprehensive software that has all the vessel, all the features that I need as a language instructor, and I've had no issues with it. The only issue that I have, as I mentioned, is formatting, and I think this is applicable to all applications or platform. Students sometimes they use their phones to submit their assignments, and sometimes there is conversion issue. But other than that, if you have a good internet connection, then you should have no problem with it. So.
Thank you very much for sharing, Dr. Bensalem.
Yeah.
Well, I think we're coming to the end of the session, and maybe we could leave
allow me
30 seconds. Yes, please. Yeah, but before that, please, just want to say that we'll have after you your comment, have 30 seconds for each of us to maybe wrap up or say a final word before ending this session. Thank you. Please go ahead, Dr.
Okay, thank you. So I think that the platform matters, but what matters most is actually the syllabus. The syllabus should be adapted to the online or distance learning, because from my experience with IES content course, I was really satisfied with the big blue button, because actually you can do a lot. You can even watch videos with your students, share a visit. I think that for Professor Ayari, who is, it can be a good platform. But I think that the most important thing is really to attract your students' attention. And I think that we should really work and try to get into a research collecting students' feedback, because from our perspective, it's good, as Amine said, but from the perspective of the students, they are the only ones to tell whether they were satisfied with it or not. So I think that the first thing to do is really to think seriously of what content for online or distance learning, and how to make it really attractive to the students, and how to make it very motivating for them, how to involve them without giving them the impression they are really, being imposed on them. And I think that involving the student is very much, and interactive classes are the best, as I can personally see it. Okay, thank you very much. And thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. So any other comment? Yes, Dr. Yacoubi, looks like you have something to say.
Just a couple of points. The first one is Kirat's notion of really focusing on technology and the development of technology. I think that's vital. This is primarily a pragmatic matter. But I think the second point is mentioned by my colleague Salah. But I want to add that you have shown us a very interesting scheme of development for the students' acquisition of a language or a cultural context. And you have stopped at the level of adaptation. And it seems to me the challenge is this, that we can move even further beyond adaptation into impact. With the technology, but also with the idea that I tried to develop in the talk about the importance of self-appropriation, of insight. That is really going back, again, linking it back to Oussama's point, focusing on, and also El Kirat's point, focusing on the students' experience and insight. So for that, we have to develop that pedagogical choice of figuring out what's going on inside the very experience of the student as he or she learns a new language, as he or she attempts to grapple with cultural issues. Now, why, Salah, I focus so much on the idea of impact? Because fundamentally, we want these students absolutely to be good world citizens, but we want to have an impact on them. So impact is a democratic operation. We don't want to impact them. We don't want to convert them. No, We want to have an impact on them. So it becomes a fundamental component of the decision making that is involved in their growth, in their total growth as a total human being, as a total individual. So that's just my last thought.
Very right. Thank you very much, Dr. Yacoubi, for this insightful comment. Anybody else? Dr. Ayari, would you like to add something?
Yes. I don't think any of the speakers were insinuating from these presentations that we're going to see a decline in study abroad programs. And I certainly hope not. Now, this is an opportunity for us to improve as educators, as faculty, to seek out new opportunities to infuse intercultural competence, global awareness in our curriculum, as Dr. Kirat mentioned, so that we can reach out to people who are not able to travel, and so that we are also able to prepare them before and after they travel. But I don't think, and I don't hope, that we're going to see a decline in study abroad programs. I don't think anybody expecting that. Inshallah, after this is over, we're going to see people traveling back to the world. But now we have new ways of talking to speakers, inviting speakers from all over the world to speak to our students, inviting other students, and not wait until the students travel to do so.
Absolutely. Well, thank you very much, Dr. Ayari, for this comment. Dr. Bensalem, do you have anything to add?
Well, I just want to say that we as educators, we are always learning on the job. Nobody knows it all. I mean, this is just an opportunity to maybe be resourceful, reevaluate your teaching practices, innovate your teaching practices. I see this as a golden opportunity. I myself am spending much more time preparing for my courses than before, much more time managing. To be honest with you, I was reluctant to spend that much time because some of it is technical, but as I get more experience, I'm really enjoying the fact that me as an educator, I'm growing professionally, I think, and this is the best part of it. And as I mentioned in my presentation, I see the future as the education as being a blend. Bringing those, as Dr. Ayari said, bringing those speakers to Texas, to A&M students, I mean, it's just a great opportunity. College Station people can see, Moroccan speakers, from a little town and I think this is a great opportunity. And when this is over, I think we'll still use or make use some of these pedagogical practices. Dardasha is a great opportunity for students, even for those who can travel. They can still, polish their skills over the course of the semester. I've personally been to College Station, very little town. I think students have very little opportunities to practice Arabic. And I think with Dardasha, this is a great opportunity. Infusing that in the curriculum, I think this is a keeper, even when this is over. And I congratulate you for that. I think this is a great opportunity to, again, bringing culture to the classroom, getting students the confidence they need in speaking. See, this turned out to be a blessing, this whole Corona thing. Don't you think so? I mean,
well,
so I'm very optimistic about the future of study abroad. As I said, it's an opportunity for students and for faculty members in school to just really reflect on their teaching practices and grow from it. And as I said, personally, I've never had the experience of teaching online before. I took courses when I was a student. And now I can confidently say that I have the experience learning from it. And I can add that to my CV, say, hey, I was once an online teacher. So.
Well, thank you very much, Professor Bensalem, for your comment. And Amine, would you like to add something as well?
Just a brief note to wrap up this webinar. I would just like to add that we were forced into moving towards the emergency remote instruction, but now we have information that coronavirus is going to be still with us for the next semester. So in many countries, of course. So we need to plan better, to use this time to prepare ourselves, to train ourselves more. I mean, as professors, as program managers, etc. And there is a piece of advice that I found on a guideline, the APA guideline for online teaching for professors. If you want to indulge in this experience in a better way, you should try to take an online class yourself and reflect on your experience as a student in that online class. Because I would say it's almost impossible to just do something without having seen it being modeled in front of you. I mean, all of us who had teaching experience had to go through the micro teaching, practicums, etc., to be able to stand in an actual classroom. But in order to do that online, I highly recommend that you just go to one of the MOOCs, Coursera, Open to Study, etc., and to experience this. It's very interesting, and there is a lot to learn. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Amine, for the tip. Well, finally, I really would like to once again thank so very much all our panelists, distinguished panelists. Dr. Youssef Yacoubi, thank you very much for your time. I know that you have other commitments. Dr. Salah Ayari, also I know that this is very early in both Texas and New Jersey, so really thank you so much for taking the time to speak to us. Dr. Yamina, Kirat, thank you very much. You're always instrumental. Thank you for co-organizing this event with us and for your time and sharing your expertise. Dr. Elias Bensalem, thousands of thanks to you as well. It's great to see you. It looks like that you've shaved your hair. You always, it still looks look handsome. So again, thank you everyone again. We promise that we will organize another webinar related to study abroad, and we hope to see you soon again. Thank you so very much. And
thank you for having me.